The global elite are now so arrogant, they're not even trying to hide their tracks anymore. Klaus Schwab is on the record boasting about infiltrating the Canadian government. He wasn't joking. This week, the WF puppets in the Canadian Parliament took their masks off and gave a standing ovation to a confirmed Nazi SS soldier. Meanwhile, in the UK, the state has ordered the police to begin arresting citizens who get fact-checked on social media for the crime of spreading so-called conspiracy theories about the globalist elite.
Nazarene told us there are no allegations from his time there. It's quite unlikely Glenn Beck didn't know at least some of this back in July. Does Glenn really believe that Tim is the character that Vice has created? I'm taking Glenn, one of my radio heroes, with a grain of salt on this particular issue at this particular time with Tim Ballard. Before we talk about the global unrest, it's not just in Israel, but also the unrest of what's going on with the global community and those autocrats and world oligarchs and shadow governments that want to control the narrative. But before we get into that, which we'll have a different angle today, I want to talk about a particular someone that I have admired for many years. Still do. I have some questions, however, about his approach to things. Some of you have attacked me on this issue already. Maybe not those who are in my friend camp. I'm not sure. Maybe some of you are an avid watcher, subscriber, and consider yourself a friend, but wanted to chastise me on this particular topic or what I said about this person. Before I let you know who this person is, I want you to know that I'm not circling the wagons around him. And it is a him. I am not saying that this person is doing anything wrong or that this person doesn't have a legitimate reason to do what they're doing. I'm just throwing up a hypothetical. Remember, folks, we hypothetically throw things up. Life is explored one step at a time through the scientific method, right? It's a hypothesis. Call it a theory. It is theorem. It is a thesis. It is conjecture. It is a supposition. It is speculation. Why do we get angry at hypothesis? And you're like, what, Troy, come on, give it. What are you talking about here? Just hold on. Because often when I mention a hypothetical or a hypothesis, which is a supposition or proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence, it's a starting point for further investigation. Look it up. I'm talking about Glenn Beck, who has been my radio hero for many years. I listened to Glenn Beck. I listened to Rush Limbaugh. I used to be a Hannity fan. No longer. So far, Tucker is moving along just right in my mind and heart. Glenn has done some things, and some people corrected me. When it came to Trump, he didn't flip-flop on that. He changed his mind. I get that. But what were the reasons why he said it was moral to vote against Trump, or it wasn't moral to vote for him? Either way, same thing. Is Glenn, here's the hypothetical question, right? We tackle life through hypotheticals. So allow me my hypothetical question. The proposition is, is Glenn distancing himself from Tim Ballard because it's not good PR for him? Or does he really think his friend, who he's had phone calls with, like he said, he's talked him down in the middle of the night many times, is he seeing a real story falling apart? I don't know. We don't have enough evidence out here, do we? We're not as close to him as Glenn is. And let me tell you, how much I revere Glenn Beck as a radio broadcasting, podcasting hero. You see this new microphone I have? This is the LCT 240 Pro. Do you know what kind of mic Glenn Beck uses? It's white, but it's the LCT 240 Pro. I admire Glenn Beck a lot. I watch Glenn Beck a lot. But I'm also wondering if I should call him out on his what appears to be jumping off the bandwagon that was so popular 8 months ago and jumping on the distancing themselves from Tim bandwagon, which is that bandwagon is particularly people that are in the limelight or are public figures and politicians and all those good spots to be in. So that's my hypothetical. Here's a quote from Glenn Beck himself. I quote, I still consider Ballard a friend, but a friend, I think, who is gravely misguided and needs to change his ways. I've seen the text messages and listened to the tape of the interviews. And I will tell you, I believe one side, but I could be wrong. So the paragraph, in a very short matter of time, he goes from, I consider him a friend, but who's gravely misguided. I believe one side, but I could be wrong. Mr. Ballard left, this is from Vice reporter Anna Merlin. Mr. Ballard left the Nazarene Fund, which was founded by Beck, shortly after leaving Operation Underground Railroad. Nazarene told us there are no allegations from his time there. It's quite unlikely Glenn Beck didn't know at least some of this back in July. Some of what? And then someone said, what a slime ball. He was just playing up his friendship to Tim a week or two ago. So a lot of this is from Reddit. Now, some of these people have different reasons why they're saying what they are. I'm looking at it a little differently. For instance, this statement calling Glenn a slime ball, they're saying it because possibly he was affiliating himself with somebody that could do the things that they did to these poor women barely a week ago. Or could we look at it like this? Is Glenn possibly trying to play both sides in case something tips a certain way and he wants to be on the side that's not going to go under the water? Are the victims afraid of Tim's supporters, or are they afraid of Tim? Not sure. But this is what Anna from Vice tweeted. If someone told me not to print something about my good friend because my good friend's alleged victims were terrified of my good friend and my good friend's supporters, I would definitely start reevaluating my use of the phrase good friend. Well, this tweet is saying something different than what I'm looking at this as more of something as of transparency. They're looking at it like this. How dare Glenn associate himself and call himself a friend to someone that might have done the things that he did if he believes one side? Right. In other words, does Glenn really believe that Tim did the things he did? That's how I'm looking at it. Does Glenn really believe that Tim is the character that Vice has created? That these attorneys have created, that these anonymous women have created? I have a problem with people who can't carry a point to its completion, going instead into every single tangent that comes up in their own minds. When they are finished, not only they haven't not only have they not proved their point, but also they've showed how scattered their minds are. It's funny because most of these are this is the ex-Mormon Reddit community. And the enemy of my enemy is my friend, once again, amongst the ex-Mormons. Glenn is right. He's absolutely right. What opportunists in this whole scenario don't understand, and these people, transparency is an awesome thing. Some have referred to Glenn as a grifter, some who are defending Tim Ballard. So all I'm doing is throwing up a question. How do you guys feel about him? Let me know in the comments section. How do you feel? Do you feel that Glenn knows his friend and he's really just trying to do the right thing? And part of doing the right thing is not putting yourself in a situation. I mean, you in a sense, you have to self-preserve. Self-preservation is not a bad thing necessarily, unless it's completely throwing someone completely under the bus for grifter reasons. I'm not saying it's wrong that Glenn is preserving himself, but if you don't sincerely believe, or if there's doubts in your mind, don't come out and say that. If there's doubts in your mind that your friend, your good friend, could be innocent. And the other thing is, if he's your good friend, you know him very well. Usually the term good friend means that you know this person very well and you know that they're telling you the truth. But I'm not saying that self-preservation is wrong. So I understand that. So I'm asking you what you think. I've had some ask what's happened to, he's distanced himself from, well, you have the Trump thing. And then we have, why did he stop having Marcus Luttrell on? He used to have him, the Congressional Medal of Honor, that received the Congressional Medal of Honor, Marcus Luttrell. Glenn had Marcus on his show once a week, and then he dropped him. What was that all about? Did Glenn Beck distance himself from Marcus Luttrell, who he used to have in all the time? Apparently he had him on, who he used to have on all the time. Why do people think Marcus lied about his story, Lone Survivor, Operation Red Wing? One person stated there is credible accounts of that night from the guys who rescued him from the village he was being hidden in, saying that he still had his full load out of mags. meaning he didn't fire one shot, his magazines. He ran and left his buddies to die, not saying he had any other option but to get out of there or die. That's just what I've read. Impossible to know the truth, but I'm almost certain the official story is full of embellishments. This is on Reddit, but this is Reddit, by the way. If he ran ahead, couldn't they prove it by him not knowing anything that happened to the other guys? Then someone wrote, I'm curious as well, but I've concluded we'll never know how much or little he changed in his telling of events. Years ago, I read Bravo 20, and I was shocked when I found out people accuse that guy of embellishing his story. I still don't understand exactly how much is disputed, but similarly, for a big part of the story, he's the sole source. I have known a couple of people from my military days who cashed in on their stories, and it did make me realize some things. Like, there are some people who do extraordinary things and just consider it all in a day's work, and others who seek out the limelight. That's true. It's very true. Those in the latter category are certainly prone to embellishments. I'm thinking of one person in particular who came back lauded as a hero on TV while their colleagues privately described them as incompetent and a danger to everyone around them. I'm thinking of, remember the John Kerry Swift boat stories? But then there's people like Tim who it isn't a day's work, but he's also trying to spread I never looked at Tim. I never thought of Tim, especially with people that surrounded themselves around him, that gather around him. I never thought of Tim as someone that was trying to come out and brag or embellish what he did. I look at Tim as somebody that's trying to spread the word about human trafficking. My cat. So I'm not going to keep going on about Marcus Luttrell. There's just one person. So my question to Glenn is, and maybe some of you already know, am I speaking out the side of my neck? Is this something that I don't have the full story on? Why has Glenn decided to not have him on anymore? Is it because he's distancing himself from Marcus Luttrell? And is that wrong? You find out somebody has done something wrong, you do that. But when you don't have any proof, like Tim, and you're going by some text messages, we've seen probably everything that Glenn has on the subject from the lawsuit. There were text messages in there. But the only thing that Glenn has over us is that he's spent time with him and he's his friend. So supposedly. A little bit more about Marcus. One big problem with the story, someone wrote, that led people to wonder about all of it. The local villager that saved Marcus has said that Marcus' version of events isn't what he witnessed at all. That villager was discussed in detail the discrepancies. Plenty of interviews with that villager are available with a quick search. There are lots of things that could easily make people question Marcus's honesty. He's the only one left to tell the story, someone writes. So who knows? So anyway, my question to you is, what's Glenn doing? Is he being a grifter? Is he abandoning a friendship because of PR? Or does Glenn see something that we don't? Either way, I'm still defending Tim, and I don't even know him that well. Hopefully he's going to come on the program one of these days. I keep trying to hit them up. So if you know someone that knows Tim, Tim, if you're out there, give me 10 minutes. 10 minutes. I've got questions. And of course, there's the Mercury One charity with the Mercury One Foundation. There are a few things. One of them is 2014 about the Lincoln Memorial Building. Go look that up. There's stuff on that. The eye of scrutiny. I'm not saying he did anything wrong. And then 5 years ago, and I think it was 2019, or was it 2018? The Mercury One was on the verge of bankruptcy, and Mark Levin bails them out, right? And I'm not saying Glenn was in the wrong, but he was allegedly spending money that he didn't have and firing 95% of the people that were employed. They were employed by Mercury One. And this could all be hullabaloo, the things that were said about him. I know life went on. So my point is not that Glenn has done anything wrong or that Tim has done anything wrong, but that Glenn understands. And one of my points, the other point is that Glenn seems to have a thing about running with the pull of opinion. Remember the Bundy incident with the cattle rancher in Utah? He won that. He came out on top. Apparently, the story also goes that Glenn shows up in a helicopter, and one of my subscribers is his daughter or granddaughter. Was it daughter or granddaughter? I think it's his daughter. I'm not going to say her name. If she wants to come on and say her name, she can. Glenn shows up in a helicopter, is going to do the story. We're going to help you. This isn't your fault. And then gets in the helicopter and leaves. Nothing said. I don't know why he did it, but my point is that I'm taking Glenn, one of my radio heroes, with a grain of salt on this particular issue at this particular time with Tim Ballard. So don't get mad at me if you are a Glenn Beck supporter. Now, this would not be journalistic integrity if I didn't tell you everything about one of my heroes. Like I said, I bought his microphone. I like the sound of Glenn's voice. This is from a piece that shall remain undisclosed at this time. Beck has also started showing up on MSNBC and at the New York Times, where he recently contributed an op-ed essay urging empathy for BLM protesters, whom he described as decent, hardworking, patriotic Americans. And a lot of this could be taken out of context. That's not my point. My point is that Glenn has seen better days himself. Thus, the founder of the right, this is a left-leaning article, obviously, but I'm making a point. Bear with me, please. Use your noggins. Thus, the founder of the right-leaning website, theblaze.com, who endorsed and campaigned for incendiary Texas Senator Ted Cruz and also ran for the Republican presidential nomination and spent much of 2016 bitterly attacking the eventual standard bearer Donald Trump as a dictator in the making, met last week for what he described as a fascinating session with the editorial board of the Times. It was what I hope for every time I meet with any press, left or right, but I would have never expected to find it at the New York Times. Beck wrote on his Facebook page, "When I arrived to a full boardroom, they informed me that this was a very unusual turnout." On the same day, October 24th, Beck granted a nearly 90-minute interview to staff writer Nicholas Schmidl of the New York Times. "We had a real conversation about how to find our way back to principles as a people and nation after the election," Beck wrote. Now, I don't have a problem with him having decent conversations with people on the left. or from classic liberals or just people in general. That's not my problem. And none of this I'm taking to heart like it's face valued. What I'm doing is I'm showing you some things. Read between the lines. And he also taped a congenial interview with PBS's Charlie Rose show, finally accepting an invitation from Rose, who also co-hosts CBS This Morning and contributes pieces to 60 Minutes that he has consistently declined over the past 5 years. Is there an evolution in Glenn Beck? The ever-sensitive Rose gently asked his guest. I hope so, Charlie, Beck replied. I know you do, Rose affirmed, and you're a growing and evolving human being. My point is that Glenn himself, or one of my points, is that Glenn himself has been under the eye of scrutiny plenty of times. He knows how it feels. So it doesn't mean that Glenn was wrong either. I mean, he still seems to be rocking and rolling. And after all is said and done, I think Tim's going to be okay. What this did more than anything in the world, I think, when it all comes down to it and it all comes out in the wash, like nickels and dimes, is that it really screwed Tim's chances up for winning the Senate race. That was the devil's golden goose egg. One other thing, a lot of people don't realize that he also marched in Selma with Al Sharpton because Glenn was being accused of racism. To prove Glenn wasn't racist, he marched with an anti-Semite. So can Glenn's motives be questioned as to why he's distancing himself from Tim? I think so. That's all I'm saying. Okay? That's all I'm saying. Now, let's get into the that global community that wants to control the narrative. And not just control the narrative, but part of the narrative, part of controlling that narrative is controlling us. And it's not getting very popular. Now, I was going to talk about the war, but we'll get updates on the war periodically when it matters, but you can go get a lot of your updates from far better, more qualified people than I can. That doesn't mean that we're not going to, but today, get most of your battle updates and things from more qualified individuals. But I want to share with you why it's possible that there are some things about the war we don't know, and some of those conspiratorial. We're not going to get into the actual conspiracies or alleged conspiracies. That's where the word conspiracy theory comes in. We're not going to get into the conspiracy theories of the war in Israel specifically, because we don't have all the details on that, and we're not for sure. That's not a for sure thing. I don't feel as strongly about that as I do Maui, or should I say, I don't have all my homework done on it yet. But what I want to do is show you that most people know about sustainable development, and that is related to Maui and Lahaina, and that could be related to what's going on in Israel. Could be. Okay. The military industrial complex and the neocons and the warmongers. That's not to say that Hamas is not a real threat. YouTube can't corral everybody right now like they did in 2016, because they did get in trouble for deplatforming a lot of truthers, and well, they were held accountable. And now there's a lot more alternative platforms out there that won't censor people. So YouTube is being careful, but they will penalize you. So there are true conspiracies in all wars. We've learned that. And there are inconsistencies and there are motives on both sides because the global community might, another hypothetical, be involved in this war. Those are some things that I'm looking into. But what we should be keeping our eye on just as strongly as we are the war, especially as Christians and as freedom lovers. So there is an idea floating around that there could be an agenda to use Hamas as leverage against Israel to further the cause for sustainable development and the New World Order. But anyway, I digress. I'm not saying that's completely a thing, so don't attack me. But I do want to show you something about how unpopular amongst all of us in the whole world Agenda 2030 has become, and how the UN is worried about that, and how sustainable development is not a popular thing amongst us, and how the global oligarchs and autocrats are concerned about it not being a popular thing. So right now, you and I, we're going to get our popcorn, if it's that time of day, or get your bonbons.
Or your cheese sticks, or your salami, your hot mustard, your scrimps, your bagels with cream cheese, and all that good stuff. Maybe a milkshake. I want you to break your diet. I want you to eat everything in the kitchen.
While we sit back and watch this together, it is sobering. And then I'll have my final thoughts.
The United Nations has declared war on conspiracy theories, describing the rise of conspiracy thinking as worrying and dangerous, while stating that conspiracy theories about Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum must be scrubbed from the internet, and the perpetrators behind the conspiracies must be silenced. The UN also warns that George Soros, the Rothschilds, and the State of Israel must not be linked to what the globalists refer to as alleged conspiracies. Before we dive in, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and join the People's Voice Locals community for exclusive and uncensored content. The link is below this video. We have long been warning that the World Economic Forum and the globalist elites are reanimated Nazis who have rebranded and regrouped, and are now pursuing the same goals as the Third Reich and committing the same crimes against humanity. Klaus Schwab's father was a high-ranking Nazi official, as were multiple members of European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's family. And don't forget, George Soros is a literal Nazi collaborator. The global elite are now so arrogant they're not even trying to hide their tracks anymore. Klaus Schwab is on the record boasting about infiltrating the Canadian government. He wasn't joking. This week, the WF puppets in the Canadian Parliament took their masks off and gave a standing ovation to a confirmed Nazi SS soldier. Meanwhile, in the UK, the state has ordered the police to begin arresting citizens who get fact-checked on social media for the crime of spreading so-called conspiracy theories about the globalist elite. Never mind the fact that fact-checkers are mostly untrained and unqualified hacks performing so-called fact-checks from the comfort of their bedroom in between posting far-left political content on personal blogs and getting high. Make no mistake, Klaus Schwab's order to world governments to accelerate Agenda 2030 and crack down on conspiracy theorists is being taken seriously in WF-infiltrated countries. During a UN meeting in New York City last week, Secretary General Antonio Guterres admitted that Agenda 2030 is under threat because the people of the world are rejecting it in droves. In other words, we are winning. The New World Order is failing, and the global elites are in a panic. So it's no surprise the UN is rolling out its most coercive plan to date to control the thoughts of humanity and punish anybody who stands in their way. The United Nations has provided the public with a toolkit to pre-bunk and debunk anybody who dares to suggest that world governments are anything but completely honest, upstanding and transparent. According to UNESCO, if you are certain that you've encountered a conspiracy theory on the internet, then you must react immediately and post a link to a fact-checking website in the comments. UNESCO also provided advice for anybody who encounters a real-life conspiracy theorist in the flesh. According to the UN agency, you must not under any circumstances be lured into an argument with a conspiracy theorist. Any argument must be taken as proof that you are part of the conspiracy and reinforce that belief, and the conspiracy theorist will probably argue hard to defend their beliefs. Instead, you must show them empathy and avoid ridiculing them, and then you must report them to social media and contact your local national press council or press ombudsman. Make no mistake, the globalist elite are panicking. Remarkably, hidden in the fine print, UNESCO admit that conspiracy theories do exist. Under the heading, "What is a real conspiracy?" the United Nations bureaucrats explain that real conspiracies large and small do exist. But according to the UN, it's only a real conspiracy theory if it's unearthed by the mainstream media. They are more often centered on single self-contained events. They are unearthed by whistleblowers and the media, using verifiable facts and evidence. There is just one problem with the UN's definition of a real conspiracy theory. The media has been fully bought and paid for by the elite, and it's the elite who are conspiring against the masses. Ever heard of Operation Mockingbird? In the 1960s, you'd get called a conspiracy theorist if you dared to suggest that the CIA was spying on journalists and controlling the mainstream media. In reality, this is exactly what was happening. Now we know that Operation Mockingbird was a CIA operation that spied on members of the Washington Press Corps in 1963, 1972, and 1973. They also paid journalists to publish CIA propaganda. Wiretapping of US citizens is against CIA code, but this is what they did. How do we know about this? Mockingbird was uncovered by the Church Committee after the Watergate scandal. John F. Kennedy secretly recorded Operation Mockingbird conversations in the Oval Office, and now they are part of the presidential recordings. So, sure, we should be trusting everything the media and fact-checkers say, right? It's not like they have a history of being manipulated by shadowy three-letter agencies and the global elite, right? But that was the 60s and 70s, and everything has gotten worse since then. In 2013, Obama signed legislation that repealed the US Information and Educational Exchange Act of 1948, also known as the Smith-Mundt Act. Why is this important? The Smith-Mundt Act was a so-called anti-propaganda law that prevented the US government's mammoth broadcasting arm from delivering programming to American audiences. But on July 2nd, 2013, Obama quietly and deceitfully changed the law, meaning that the US government and the CIA could legally propagandize US citizens. Strangely, the mainstream media don't like to acknowledge this fact, but it suits government agencies and the United Nations down to the ground. Of course, they will tell you to place blind trust in the mainstream media and fact-checkers, regardless of how many times they get proved wrong time and time again. Hunter Biden's laptop from hell, anybody? It took the media more than a year to admit that it was a real thing. For a whole year, the media was telling us that the laptop story was Russian disinformation, and fact-checkers were censoring social media, scrubbing it clean of any trace of the laptop from hell story, for fear that it would damage Biden Sr.'s presidential run. In 1998, Noam Chomsky co-authored a book with Edward Herman called Manufacturing Consent. It blasted apart the notion that the mainstream media informs the public and serves the public, so that we can better engage in the political process. In fact, the mainstream media manufactures our consent. It spreads propaganda from their paymasters, the three-letter agencies and global elites, so that we fall in line. Democracy is staged with the help of the mainstream media, which works as a propaganda machine. Mainstream media is not a check on power. The very system requires complicity. Governments, corporations, global institutions like the United Nations, they know how to play the media game. They know how to control the news narrative. And they know how to manipulate and control the masses. They feed official scoops, official accounts and interviews with so-called experts. They breed fear because fear breeds compliance. If you want to challenge power, you'll be pushed to the margins. The CIA invented the term conspiracy theorist in the 1950s in order to denigrate those who dare to ask questions outside of the box and challenge the corrupt system. The United Nations war on conspiracy theorists is more of the same. They want to shame those among us who dare to ask questions and question the official narrative. Ask yourself, when was the last time the media unearthed a conspiracy? Also ask yourself, when was the last time the media covered up a conspiracy? The list is endless.
So there's really not much to say there. I mean, it's been said and done. It's been done and said. We know who this group is. We're just waiting. It's a waiting game. And as members of the church, we're gathering Israel. Continue to stand up for what's right. Continue. Don't take things to an extreme level. Stay in the mainstream of the church. Stay in the mainstream of the church. I don't mean the mainstream of the church, meaning don't defect from the program. Don't defect from the program. Don't do the mainstream things that you know are not following Christ, but don't defect from the program. Follow a living prophet, follow the 12 apostles, and seek personal revelation. And keep your eye on the prize. And wait and watch and pray. Watch and pray, right? Matthew 26:41. Then saith he unto them, My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here and watch with me. And he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. And he cometh unto the disciples and findeth them asleep. And he saith unto Peter, What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away again the second time and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them and went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation, and gather Israel.